I now recognize Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman. So you acknowledge you've received a grant in 2014, NAID awarded an EHA grant entitled Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence to your organization, correct?
Yep.
That's not that. And once COVID outbreak happened, you labeled the lab leak theory as conspiracy theory.
That's not what I said, actually. I said that there were conspiracy theories at the time that we wrote about in our letter in Lancet, including HIV sequences in the virus and snake DNA, some very bizarre things.
Your opinion was used to help. You said trust the scientist,
yeah.
Not necessarily because of you. I don't know that you had any contact with social media companies. Did you have contact with social media companies during that time?
Well, I've posted things on social media.
As far as having, a number of the scientists, their opinions were banned. Our government even worked to help ban some of those scientific opinions.
No, that's not what we do.
That differed than yours. Would you acknowledge that that was bad practice, at least, that our government helped work with social media companies to help ban certain scientific opinions?
I mean, if a social
media... Do you think
media...
that benefited science? Do you think that was...
I think there's been a lot of misinformation. There still is on social media. I think it's good that social media companies are going to scientists to get information about whether the data they're putting out is true or false.
There were virologists who had years of experience, who had differing opinions, who were silenced, license threatened to be revoked, all those different kind of things in the name of science. We had Fauci almost declare himself to be science, and that those kind of things, I think, put a deep distrust in the American people for some of the institutions we're now asking them to rely upon. Looking back, do you think there was any error in that? Are you concerned about that? Or do you think, hey, don't...
Well, I think, as I said in my opening statement, the emotions during a pandemic are very high. We have loved ones. We've all had that. We've all had our children infected by COVID and worrying that they're going to get really sick. And we know people who've died, and it's very upsetting, very tragic. I think the emotions lead to a sort of hyper reaction to some of these things. And I think that we should trust our scientists. And I think that the head of a government institute that's set up to work on infections.
Knowing what you know now, do you regret working with the lab in Wuhan?
Look, our mission is to prevent pandemics. Pandemics emerge
knowing what you know now,
places.
do you regret working with them?
Pandemics,
not debating what you knew then, but knowing what you now.
It's our mission to do this. We don't do this because we want to go and work in foreign countries and risk our lives. Pandemics emerge there. If we can stop them there, we stop them getting here. That's what we do. It's written into our mission. It's in our DNA.
There's no evidence to a lab leak theory. That's what you've said today a couple times.
What I said, there's zero verifiable scientific evidence. Zero.
Okay, but we have evidence that the Wuhan lab destroyed data. Does that concern you at all?
Yes. Any lab that destroys data concerns me.
Okay, knowing what you know now, do you regret working with the Wuhan lab?
As I've said...
Do you think working with labs that destroy data is sound?
I have no choice. We work in countries where diseases emerge, whether they're our allies or our competitors, because our goal is to stop those diseases from emerging.
So one of the troubling things for us when we go home, because we're representing the taxpayers, who no doubt are, most of them are not virologists or scientists, but they're going, we're paying money to fund research in a country that's in unrestricted warfare against us, that destroys evidence, and then you still are like, well, maybe we should continue working with them. And
I recognize those concerns, absolutely. But if we want to prevent the next pandemic coming out of China, how do we know when it's going to happen? We need scientists on the ground to get that information so we're better prepared.
Do you maintain that the lab leak theory is a plausible theory today?
As I've said all the way through this, it's possible, but extremely unlikely.
And having done it over, you would continue to work with the Wuhan lab?
Well, there are a lab in China that does virology research.
This weighs into your organization is still receiving taxpayer funds, and you're still making decisions on which labs across the world that
we don't work in China. We don't work with the Wuhan lab.
Okay,
they're debarred from funding.
But the taxpayer right now is trusting you in some essence through the various recommended channels to make decisions on who we're working with. And if you're picking labs and you don't think it's an issue that a lab destroyed data and that's not a disqualifying factor, that's a concern.
Well, let me remind you, we didn't pick a lab. We proposed to do research with that lab. The State Department and NIH reviewed it and said that lab was on a list of labs that are preferred to work with.
Well, I'm out of time, and I know Dr. Fauci will be here, but there's the, quote, layers of accountability have become layers of plausible deniability
Well, that's
in
a
these
fact, what I
different
just said. It
institutions.
really is a fact.
And so we'll have to dig into that because my time's
Certainly.
up. Thank
I'll
you,
send you
Chairman. I yield
the
back.
information about it.
Now recognize Dr.